My name is Joe Jaworski, and I stay very involved in trying to balance Texas back to something resembling what it should be. Progress Texas is a leader in forcing that balance during my lifetime. And I'm trying to make a joke here, but the reality is we don't have that long. This needs to be happening now, and you guys are one of the most vital voices right now in the state fighting the authoritarian government that we find ourselves led by. The reality is Progress Texas gives me hope. I listen to what you say, and I understand it, and it gives us a rallying point. That's why Progress Texas matters.
It's Friday, July 18th, 2025, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. So the next time the Daily Dispatch hits this feed on Monday, what's looking like a highly dramatic, contentious, and consequential special legislative session will be getting started in Austin at the Texas State Capitol. Or will it? Desperate times call for desperate measures, and the possibility of a Democratic quorum break in which enough of the Democrats in either chamber stay away to prevent business from moving forward is looking more and more likely, especially in the House. Desperate, but not unprecedented. It's happened several times in our state's history. For example, in the summer of 2021, over 50 House Democrats, including Reps Jasmine Crockett, Trey Martinez-Fisher, and Rafael Anchia, flew to Washington, D.C. to block passage of Republican voting restrictions during the first special session of the 87th legislature. The GOP reaction as more Texas Democrats and more young voters choosing Democrats handed the 2020 election to Democrat Joe Biden. In response, the Republicans pushed a massive voter suppression effort to keep from losing again. It happened twice in 2003, the Killer D's walkout, when more than 50 House Dems skipped the state and holed up in a Holiday Inn in Ardmore, Oklahoma, to place themselves outside the reach of Texas law enforcement. Similar to the current situation, that was to deny quorum on a GOP-backed congressional redistricting effort led by Republican U.S. House Majority Leader Tom DeLay, Governor Rick Perry, and Texas Speaker Tom Craddock. And later that same year, in 2003, the Texas 11 walkout in the state Senate. 11 Democrats, including Leticia Van de Putte, Rodney Ellis, and Judith Zaffarini, fled to Albuquerque, New Mexico to block that same mid-decade redraw. And in 1979, there was the famous Killer Bees quorum break. Also in the Senate, 12 Democratic lawmakers crowded into an Austin garage apartment to hide for 12 days, if you can imagine that, to resist a bill moving the Texas presidential primary to March. Current U.S. Congressman Lloyd Doggett was one of those 12. A court case in Florida highlights the desperation here for the Democrats. Kurt Anderson at the Associated Press says that state Supreme Court upheld Florida's current congressional redistricting map yesterday, rejecting a challenge over the elimination of a majority black district in northern Florida that was pushed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who appointed most of the justices on that court. So Florida's current congressional districts will hold, giving Republicans a 20-8 advantage over Democrats for the 2026 midterm elections and beyond. Exactly the trend that Donald Trump has ordered Texas Republicans to press forward here. WRLN in South Florida talked to Genesis Robinson, executive director of the African-American voting rights group Equal Ground. She says, quote, with today's ruling, the Florida Supreme Court has turned its back on black voters, the state constitution, and the fundamental principles of representative democracy. It's a direct attack on black political power and a decision that will have ripple effects for generations, unquote. This is the line that Texas Democrats are challenged to hold next week here in the Lone Star State. On the other end of the lower 48, California Governor Gavin Newsom remains seemingly determined to engage this battle for democracy with a redraw of his own in the Democratic direction. Laurel Rosenhall at the New York Times is not optimistic about the odds of Newsom pulling that off, either by getting the California state legislature to pass a law that would allow lawmakers to redraw their congressional maps mid-decade. Most experts on the matter say the courts in California would likely reject legislation that Newsom calls a novel legal question. Another option, and much more compelling if you ask me, would be to put it to the voters to change the state constitution and allow redistricting ahead of the 2026 election. Newsom calls that the clean way of doing it. He says he thinks the measure would win, but there are political, practical, and legal hurdles here as well, as 2/3 of the California legislature would have to agree to such a ballot measure, a high bar even in a state where Democrats have a supermajority. Back to Texas, where State Rep Ron Reynolds took to Twitter yesterday with a statement of his own. It reads in part, quote, "They say everything's bigger in Texas, including the lengths folks will go to hold on to power. President Trump recently called for Texas Republicans to deliver 5 new congressional seats, and they didn't hesitate. Not by earning more support or expanding their base, but by gerrymandering black and brown communities to secure an advantage. The message was clear. Manipulate the maps, preserve the power, and silence the people. I am ready, willing, and able to get into good trouble by breaking quorum when justice is on the line. I did not come to the Capitol to sit quietly while democracy is dismantled," unquote. We appear to be in for high drama, as I mentioned, over the next few days. Do stick with Progress Texas for the latest. Early on, the race to replace the almost certainly outgoing Ken Paxton at the Texas Attorney General's office has gotten interesting with the announcement this week of 2 well-known Democrats in that race, Dallas State Senator Nathan Johnson and former Galveston Mayor Joe Jaworski, who we heard at the top there. A nice rundown from Lone Star Left is linked in the show notes. Michelle Davis writes in part, quote, "We're so used to living under a fascist Republican Attorney General, I'm not sure we've even had the conversation about what it would look like to have a Democratic Attorney General, one who is fighting for the people, and why this seat is going to be so crucial in 2026, in the last 2 years of the orange one, when AI is taking off and our climate is collapsing," unquote. Great insight as always from Michelle Davis. See the link in the show notes. Layer upon layer of heartbreak in the Hill Country since the flood of July 4th. As of today, 2 weeks ago, the Houston Chronicle says that the vast majority of homeowners impacted by that flood have no flood insurance to fall back on. Kerr County is far below the national average of so-insured homes, and FEMA's 100-year floodplain, which itself appears to have offered an insufficient and inaccurate model for this particular flood, as a great many homes outside its design were damaged or destroyed. This Houston Chronicle article contains a highly instructive map that details the range of damage in Kerr County, showing that nearly every home and multifamily residential complex in the 100-year floodplain did indeed flood, and thousands of residential structures outside the floodplain were flooded as well. Over 13,000 of those structures that FEMA didn't designate as high risk. This map is quite a sight and shows the nightmare that is really only beginning, even for those lucky enough not to have lost loved ones in the Texas Hill Country. See the show notes. Between the redistricting drama and the flood, the ongoing struggle over immigration enforcement has taken a bit of a backseat lately. There's a major development there, as Alejandro Serrano at the Texas Tribune writes. A Texas judge has dismissed a misdemeanor trespassing case against Pedro Luis Salazar Cuervo, a 28-year-old man from Venezuela with no known criminal record, who was arrested by Texas state troopers upon crossing the U.S.-Mexico border and accused of being a Venezuelan gang member, which led federal authorities to deport him to the notorious Secot death prison in El Salvador, where he remains today. This is the detainee you may have heard about, of whom authorities found a photo on a phone posing with another man with tattoos, who had himself also been accused of being a gang member. Salazar Cuervo himself has no tattoos. Progress Texas Board Chair Louis A. Bedford IV wrote an op-ed for the Dallas Morning News earlier this week in which he decries the alarming trend of ICE agents concealing their faces while picking people off the streets, to many of us a striking vision of rising fascism. Lewis says, quote, "This isn't just a civil liberties issue. It's a fundamental question of democracy. A nation where federal agents can operate in secret without oversight is a nation teetering toward authoritarianism. If ICE agents can refuse to identify themselves while detaining civilians, and the government can redefine who belongs here with every passing year, every passing day, then what remains of our due process? Who even are we?" Unquote. Important read in the show notes and at our website. Our mission at Progress Texas is to counter the conservative disinformation machine, which is funded by oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups, all while fact-based independent media outlets increasingly face threats to their funding. While access to those outlets is frequently free, as it is here at Progress Texas, it does take listener support and viewer support to keep fact-based independent media going. If you've come to appreciate what we do at Progress Texas, now more than ever, we could use your support as a monthly contributor, and no amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org/donate. Thanks to Robert Whitehead, Laura Wildenthal, and DK Wilkerson, all of whom have joined the team lately. We appreciate all of you very much. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Friday, July 18th, 2025. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again on Monday.